Beep, 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 beep. Hi up, peeps. How you doing? Right, got a fascinating one for us today. A fascinating one called Michel Foucault and Iran's Ayatollahs. Those of you that are paying attention will be aware of the role of Michel Foucault in the creation of queer theory and other related rubbish. He was a hard left idiot who worked in the Frankfurt School, lauded as an intellectual and an incredible man and a thinker. I think he was just an idiot. And I'm sure there'll be many of you out there that do too. But this is fascinating for a number of reasons. Not least of all, what we're seeing here is an article from 2020, which links Foucault to Islamism and subsequently the left to Islamism. I think this is fascinating. So I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy it. I'm going to do a read through with you now. Become a warrior teacher. Come and join us. Yep, starting in a couple of weeks. So it'd be great to see you. Buy me a coffee if you enjoy my work, but most of all, subscribe to this channel, please. Hit the subscribe button. So let's get started, right? Michel Foucault and Iran's Ayatollahs, but by Dr. Reza Parchizadeh. I hope I've got that right. May 28th. This is from the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, which is a center that examines things, and it's been around since about 1975. It's worth having a look at what work they do, especially as they really are calling for peace. They seem to be a very, very good organisation in that respect. But do your own work. Okay, so there we go. You can see the Michel Foucault philosophy dedication there from Paris. This is called the Besser Center Perspectives paper number 1586. And the executive summary is as follows. This is to give you an idea of what's coming. The Islamic Revolution in Iran, which brought Islamists to power for the first time in modern history, pitted the global left, perhaps best personified by Michel Foucault, against the global right. To this day, the global left's advocacy for Islamism continues to guide the West's general approach towards the Middle East. Fascinating. The Islamist regime in Iran has now been firmly in power for over 40 years. The leaders of the regime and those that they favour continue to benefit from their decades-long rule. But the people of Iran, as well as the countries in its neighbourhood, suffer from the tyranny and terror unleashed on them by the regime and its ruthless revolutionary guards. Analysts of different stripes usually tend to interpret the so-called Islamic Revolution of 1979 as the manifestation of the yearning of the Iranian people to free themselves from the tyranny of monarchy and Western interference. They tend not to mention that the revolution had a broad ideological scope that pitted the global left against the global right on the Iranian battleground. Utterly fascinating. Philosophically, I think we're seeing the same thing, but I'll leave you to decide that. Some of the most influential Western leftist intellectuals had a great personal stake in the Iranian Revolution. They played a significant role in pushing Iran into the arms of Islamism in order to fulfill their ideological dream of defeating capitalism around the world. The foremost of these intellectuals was French philosopher and journalist Michel Foucault. Foucault's interest in Islamism started in 1978 when the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera called on him to write a series of articles about Iran. To fulfill that assignment, Foucault spent time among members of the left-leaning Confederation of Iranian Students and other opponents of the Pahlavi regime in Europe. He then went to Tehran and met with many prominent revolutionaries. When he returned to France, he visited Ayatollah Khomeini in the village of Neauport-le-Château, near Paris, where he was exiled at the time. Foucault strongly supported what he called the spiritual revolution in Iran, an event he believed was meant to save humanity from the clutches of materialism and capitalism. They're just mad. Though he was occasionally called out in French intellectual circles and in the French press for taking such a stance, he did not stop supporting the Islamist revolution. However, the subsequent violence of the Islamo-fascist regime eventually repelled even the enthusiastic Foucault. When news of summary executions on school rooftops in Tehran and mass executions of regime opponents in prisons, especially those who had leftist leanings, began to make the rounds in the international media, Foucault was severely hurt both intellectually and emotionally. He wrote a letter to the PM of Iran's interim government, Mehdi Bazagan, in which he condemned the violence. It was at that point that Foucault began to distance himself from Islamism, a subject he avoided until his death a few years later. Utterly extraordinary. Utterly extraordinary. I'm asking today, I suppose, Has the left finished its love affair with Islamism? And I don't think it has. From what we're seeing, I don't think it has. If their overall aim is the end of capitalism, the end of all the stuff that we've got that got us here, which it certainly seems to be, if that's still sitting there festering in the background since the 19 God knows whens, what hope do we have? The impact of Foucault's experience with the Iranian Revolution can be perceived in his later works, especially The History of Sexuality. There's a lot can be perceived in that, I can tell you. In this 3-volume study on the epistemology of power, i.e. the production of power, the knowledge of power, the words of power, one of his most mellow works, he challenges some of his own most controversial earlier positions. In this work, Foucault no longer regards capitalism as a totalitarian system. What a surprise. Despite its shortcomings and constraints, he sees in it room for positive action. The insane left. But be that as it may, the legacy of Foucault's advocacy of Islamism remains with us to this day. His favour made it much easier for the Islamists to justify their position to Western audience despite their tyranny and violence in the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Asia. Leftists, who were hostile on principle to Western values, under the all-encompassing term capitalism, felt free to ally themselves with Islamists and thereby helped to promote their agenda in the West. Almost from the very beginning of the revolution in Iran, it became fashionable in the Western academic world to employ Islamist professors, scholars, and researchers. The recruitment of Islamists at Middle East study centres in Europe and North America and their promotion in influential Western media became commonplace. Over the past 40 years, the global intellectual approach to Iran has thus been firmly in the clutches of Islamists and their left-leaning allies. Iran has enjoyed Western intellectual protection through its descent into decades of tyranny, reminiscent of that of the Tsar-like Putin and communist China. Throughout these years, liberal Iranians who called for Western-style democracy in Iran and normalization of relationships with the West, Israel, and the Arab world have been opposed and silenced with the chimera of Islamophobia. However, as the majority of the people of Iran and the Middle East are sick and tired of Islamism, a great opportunity has arisen to reverse that trend. Iran must be brought back to the West, but to achieve that end, Islamism must lose its intellectual impunity and be relentlessly put to question. The time has come to review and banish entrenched cliques for the sake of a more liberal, peaceful, and prosperous world. As the mayhem started in Iran, it is only appropriate that it should also end in Iran. I think that's a superb piece by Dr. Parchizadeh there, and I think it's worth you reading and trying to understand. I think we are now in a situation where if we don't deal with Islamists, with the entrenched idea of the Islamists, and we don't deal with it on a global stage, that we're going to be in real trouble. But I'm hearing great things from Iran. People are fed up. They've had enough of these monsters. And I think it's possible that the Iranian people may, in the future, do something about it and end this terrible, terrible tyranny. Well, good luck to you. Go and read it. Plenty of food for thought there and stuff to think about. I think that the fact that Foucault was also involved with Islamism is a very interesting thing indeed. Anything to bring down the West. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. I'll see you later. Thank you very much for watching. Come be a warrior teacher. Bye-bye.